Part two of how to buy a car the smart way, and I wanted to focus all in on debt and the different types of debt that you can use to fund a car, between funding through your mortgage, getting a personal loan, or using what's called a chattel mortgage. Now, first up, car loans, pretty straightforward. Whether you got a personal loan or a loan from the dealer or a specialist car finance provider, can be easy to access and pretty simple to set up. The downside with those sorts of loans is that typically the interest rate will be a little bit higher than what you could get from funding with some of the other methods that I'll mention. However, occasionally when a vehicle seller is really looking to do deals, they can give you even more competitive pricing. This is particularly evident a couple of years ago, a little bit less common now, but if you can get a sweet deal on your interest rate through a provider, this option can be a great one to look at. The second one is funding it against a property mortgage. So if you're a homeowner, whether you own your own home or an investment property, you can draw against that mortgage if you've got the equity for the banks to actually do that and fund the car that way. Now, big advantage of doing that is that typically the interest costs on a mortgage are going to be a lot lower than the interest costs on a car specific loan. That's because a car loan is typically unsecured and those products just generally charge more. So funding through your mortgage can be cheaper. The downside of doing that though is that you don't have as high repayments, which is also an upside, but it is a downside because if you pay the car loan down over 30 years, you're going to end up paying a lot more in interest costs. So if you fund through that way, and if you don't want to pay overs in interest costs, then you need to crank up your repayments so that you pay down that debt faster. The third option is what's called a chattel mortgage, which is pretty common through dealership type loans. The advantage of one of these products is that they can be low from a fee perspective and an interest rate perspective. But the downside of a chattel mortgage is that typically the interest that you pay is locked in. What that means is that if you wanted to sell the car early, it may have a 3-year term or a 5-year term. If you want to sell the car early for any sort of reason, then typically you will need to pay out all of the interest costs as if you'd borrowed the money for the full period. So that can mean that you end up paying way overs in interest if you're going to pay it off early. It also means that you give up a bit of flexibility. If you buy a car the smart way, it will make a big difference to your cash flow day to day, the interest costs that you have, and therefore how quickly you actually get ahead. So it's something that you want to get right.